Crusty Tips, if you ever watched this, you are by far one of the worst Vanguard I've ever played with. Fellas, if you're watching this, you've either lost 5 games in a row, or you're one bad teammate away from uninstalling. Don't fret too much. I've compiled some tips to help you do better in solo queue in Marvel Rivals. Now just as a general, and this will happen for every season change, and typically the mid-seasons too, but not as bad. If it's brand new season, wait a couple days before you play ranked. Everyone will be back out in droves, which means the extraordinarily good players are there, as well as all the bad players. Those that really shouldn't be in your rank but somehow are. And while there'll always be a common thing for a ranked, I find it's extraordinarily bad always in the first couple days. But in all seriousness, let's get into the best tips to help you rank up in Marvel Rivals. In case you didn't already know, Marvel Rivals doesn't do skill-based matchmaking. They do EOMM, engagement optimized matchmaking, meaning sometimes you get to go on a great win streak, but more often you'll find that you go on losing streaks. And not just losing a game or two, rather I've seen it go up to 13, 14, 15 losses in a row. Even if you get MVP or SVP every single time, it doesn't change anything. So how do you deal with that? If you lose 2 or more games, take a break. Now that kind of sucks because you want to play Marvel Rivals and play ranked, otherwise you wouldn't be playing it, but you're going to end up on a losing streak, and this will be the best way to counteract that. Take an hour, go watch some TV, go for a walk, do something else. Talk to your family, they miss you. And then when you do come back, try again. That also does apply to the mental health. It's very easy to get tilted in the game. If you're losing over and over, you get bad teammates. Super easy to complain about it. Take a break, reset yourself. If you're tilted, you are definitely going to play worse. Now, since you are going to be solo queuing, I think this is going to be one of the best things to do, and that is learn 2 to 3 characters per role. At a start, it wouldn't be bad to learn 1 to 2, but I think 2 to 3 is going to be that sweet spot, at least just starting out. Because between bans and someone else picking a character for whatever role, you don't want to be having to fill without knowing how to play a certain character. So if you're playing ranked, for example, and the enemy team bans Luna, and the only other person you know is Loki, which your teammate takes, suddenly you're left trying to fill support, but you can't play anyone. That's a good general for it. On top of which, depending on team comps, your team, enemy team, if they're running heavy divers, for example, you don't want to be stuck playing someone like Mantis who, while you can stun a character, you're going to be out of luck for most cases. Knowing someone like Loki, for example, where you have the runes that heal you, or a cloak and dagger where you can throw down a bubble or kind of float, levitate out of the way. You don't want to be stuck in a bad time just because you don't know how to play anyone else. That also does apply for DPS and for the Vanguard. If the enemy team is full of flyers, for example, as a DPS, it's going to be primarily your job to take care of it. But if you only know how to play Squirrel Girl and Wolverine, you're not going to be able to do much for the flyers. And as a DPS, you will end up being the problem for that game. The next thing I strongly recommend is once a week or so, maybe once every 2 weeks, do a VOD review. Watch back some of your games. You can't control what your teammates do or what teammates you get, but you can control on how good you play and focus on getting better. Whether that's realizing your aim sucks or is incredibly good, or you're at a position, ulting at a bad time, you died at a spot you really shouldn't have died, doing a VOD review will allow you a slower environment to carefully deconstruct what's happening and what you could have done better. VOD reviews can be a little bit odd and tricky to get into at first, but it's unbelievably helpful and definitely not enough people take advantage of it. Kind of going back to a previous tip, do not be afraid to change your role or character if needed. If the game calls for a Punisher and you're not doing well on the Punisher, let your team know, switch up, swap with another teammate, because it's going to be better that you do somewhat okay with a different role rather than doing completely bad in a certain role. Sometimes it happens, you get an off game. And then speaking of switching up your role, don't be afraid to change the character that you play as well. It's something that isn't done too much yet, but is so good to do, is counterpick the enemy team. If you're in a match and you know that the enemy team is full of divers or full of flyers, or they're very shield heavy, for example, change up the character that you're playing to counter that. If the enemy team is full of flyers, and we saw this a lot, pick Hela, pick Punisher. If the enemy team has a lot of divers and flankers, Scarlet Witch honestly isn't that bad, but someone like Namor is really good. This is incredibly useful, especially if you play against a one-trick pony, who, even though they might be really good, can be easily countered by a different pick. I'm not too sure why it's not more commonly done at the moment. You don't have to wait for the mid-round change in order to switch up your character. Now this one is a personal one, and I really kind of recommend it anyways. I don't suggest having voice comms on, at least too early into your ranked career. A lot of teammates can be very toxic. All that you really need is the pings. Set that up for tagging enemies, when to retreat, when you need health, and your ultimate charge status, and you'll be more than good to go. Unfortunately, a lot of players do have very fragile egos, and I noticed that in like 90% of the voice comms. They can never do wrong, and it's always somehow your fault. Communication is good, but you don't need to use voice comms. Another good thing to note, especially if you are solo queuing, which this is about, is choose a teammate and focus on what they're focusing on. If your teammate is trying to get a pick on Iron Man, focus on the Iron Man with them to get the pick. It's better to be in a 2v1 than two separate 1v1s. And now this isn't solely specific for solo queuing, but just still good to know for Marvel Rivals, and this game anyways, is don't stagger. If you die during a team fight, yeah, it happens. But if your team is constantly getting picked off one by one, and you're all just trying to make your way back to the fight, getting it and then dying, that's not going to do your team any good. Your team is not going to win a 2v6 and then a 4v6, waiting for your teammates to respawn. Even though it does take a little bit longer, and you lose a little bit more of the objective, this will be the best chance for you to actually win the team fight and take control again. Also, don't go through the open spot in lanes. If you're walking down a pathway, do not stand right in the middle of it. Use the walls, use elevation for cover. This shouldn't need to be told to you, but it's something that a lot of people still do, is they just stay out in the open and take all the hits that they could take. Solo queuing in Marvel Rivals isn't all that hard to do. And while it definitely is harder than having a teammate or a partner to play with, sometimes that doesn't always work out. So keeping the basics in mind, learning and training to be the best player that you can be is going to be what takes you the furthest. On top of learning when to take a break, because a losing streak is a losing streak, and it's not one that you can just break at a willpower. It happens because that's what the game is designed to do. Don't be afraid to switch, don't be afraid to counterpick, learn several characters for each of the roles, and by golly, if you're doing poorly, just say you need to play a different role. I can promise you your team would rather make a switch and win, rather than having you be the bottom fragger and losing. You can't control what your teammates do, but you can control what you do, and that's going to be the most important thing to keep in mind. Because while you are playing with 5 other teammates that you get no say in, the enemy team also experiences the same thing. Sometimes you will run into people that are squatted up, and you can't control that. But it's the same thing for them. Sometimes they're going to run into people that are squatted up. They can't control that. All that you can do is focusing on being the best that you can be, and that's going to take you the furthest. Do you have any tips of your own for solo queuing in Marvel Rivals? Let me know in the comments below. And hey, hit that like button if you're still watching, subscribe for more videos like this if you haven't already, and stay tuned for the next one. YouTube thinks you like this video next. Let me know if you do.